Hello and welcome to Conceptual Proliferation. This is our Sunday morning teaching by Jetsuma Ahkon Lhamo, and we're really glad to have you with us. Today's teaching is entitled Conceptual Proliferation. It was originally taught in February of 1992, and we hope you thoroughly enjoy it. So, without further ado, off we go.
For our teaching today, for the adults, and I'd like to say that it's true that the adults normally enjoy the kids' part more than they do theirs, because it's kind of more on their level. And we're all worrying about the big stuff anyway, which is what the kids are working on. For the adult portion of the teaching, one of the things that I would like to talk about in our ongoing continuum of trying to understand correct view from many different angles is the conceptual proliferation that we continually engage in and how that actually occurs. If any of you have had any familiarity with any kind of psychotherapy or with any kind of counseling or with any kind of inner work at all, one of the things that you might have noticed during your work is that depending on how you accept information and how you react to it, under those conditions you'll have a certain kind of experience, and that certain kind of experience really depends on how you accept things, on how you hear things. How many of you have noticed that? That it isn't really what happens to you, it's how you hear it or how you accept it. Are there any of you that haven't noticed that? Some of you didn't raise your hands. Okay, it's just that you didn't. I was just checking. You haven't noticed that. Okay, here's what I'm saying. Whatever happens to you isn't always what determines how you feel. It's how you accept what's happening to you. Do you agree with that? Okay. Because one thing can happen to two different people, and they can have two totally different experiences. Isn't that true? That's true. Let's say two different people have a car accident. Buddha forbid. Two different people have a car accident. One of them tends to be a heavy breather, and they're just going through the tragedy and the shame of it and the anger of it, or whatever it is that their particular habit, and habit may be the operative word there, happens to be. But another person tends to accept things like that, kind of like water rolling off a duck's back. It goes down easier somehow. It's just their temperament and their personality. They both had the same experience, and maybe they both walked away without injury and had their cars totaled, or both broke a leg, heaven forbid, or whatever. But they might still have totally different experiences, even though they had the same kind of situation. So basically, that's what I'm talking about. So you all have seen that, I'm sure. Even in your own lives, you've seen that. And a lot of time during the course of counseling, you don't really engage in trying to change the facts of your life, the things that you cannot change, but you more often engage in changing how you respond to certain things and how you understand them. Well, if this is true in something as relatively simplistic as psychology, human psychology or psychotherapy as we know it. And I say relatively simplistic because the Buddha's understanding of what our nature actually is much more profound or much deeper than a psychologist's understanding of what our nature would be is. Even if we understand that phenomena on a very simplistic level, and it seems to be an accepted fact these days, that we understand that our perception really dictates our experience. How much more so must it be at the level that the Buddha approaches it from? The Buddha approaches it at the level of understanding our true nature. And the Buddha teaches us that our nature is the pristine primordial wisdom nature, which is free of any contrivance and free of any discrimination or delusion. That nature is spacious and innately wakeful and free of any kind of limitation. But the Buddha teaches us that we are also samsaric beings, which means that while we have that nature, we somehow throughout time have arrived at the acceptance of the idea of self-nature as being inherently real. Now, the nature that the Buddha talks about is a nature which is free of the contrivance of self. That nature is free of that thought or idea or confinement, I should say. Yet, at the same time, while our nature is free of that contrivance of the idea of self-nature, somehow we have arrived at the false assumption of self-nature. And we have the habit of a continuum experienced as self. Now, in that continuum experienced as self, we have engaged since time out of mind, because the assumption of self-nature didn't only come at this birth, according to the Buddha's teaching. It didn't even come at the previous birth. We have been assuming the identity of self-nature since time out of mind, since literally beginningless time, a time that is untraceable. The Buddha teaches us that we were born many, many times, that we are continuing on a wheel of death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth. And that continuum actually continues because of the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real, and therefore the desire that arises. The Buddha teaches us that we actually continue, as we do, wandering in samsara or cyclic death and rebirth due to desire based on the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real. Because it is the self that desires. And the mechanics of that is that in order to be a self, in order to assume the identity of self, we have to discriminate between self and other. Once we discriminate between self and other, and that does happen habitually and instantaneously and instinctively, without our ever thinking about it, once we assume the separation or the distinction between self and other, we see other as being separate and out there, and have to, in order to assume a distinction, react towards self with either attraction, repulsion, or neutrality. And as I've said before, the neutrality is really, if you think of attraction and repulsion as being different sides of the same coin, which they actually are, neutrality would be like the side of that coin or the rim of that coin, because you have to bounce back between attraction and repulsion before you can feel neutral about something. We constantly revolve with that habitual tendency and have done so since time out of mind. Excuse me. That being the case, we have that habit. We also, once we assume self-nature, and once we distinguish between self and other, and once we react toward or against other begin again instantaneously to create the habit of hope and fear. It either results in hope or fear. And here's how that works. And here's a very simple way of understanding how that works. But you've seen it in your life, and you see it every day, every moment. Assuming the nature of self, we see that everything else is other. Let's say we were to see one other person. You cannot walk into a room and open your eyes and see another person without reacting. You will react. You'll see the color of their hair and you'll either like it or not. It may be a quiet idea, but it's in there. You'll assess the way they're dressed and how they act and what they look like and what they smell like and what they seem like to you. You'll have an instantaneous reaction. Based on that reaction, you will instantaneously, and there'll be no choice about this, it's an instantaneous habit, you will react with hope and fear, or hope or fear, sometimes both. And the way that happens can be very subtle. Of course, if the person appears to you to be very dangerous, perhaps they're carrying a weapon or they seem to you to be a dangerous type, you're going to react with fear and repulsion. Or if they seem very kindly and very gentle, you might react to them with attraction. But the hope and fear that's mixed in there would be that if you react toward a person with repulsion, you'll feel a kind of fear. There's a kind of fear there. What will, and basically the fear sounds like, what will they do to me? How will they change me? How will they make me uncomfortable? What's going to happen here? I don't know what's going to happen here. So there's a fear that comes from that. Or if you see a person that seems to you very kindly and gentle, there's also a hope that comes. But there's also fear mixed into it, just as there is hope in the other. When you see a person that's fearful, there's also the hope that somehow they might like you. But if you see a person that's kindly and gentle, you'll think, oh, I hope they give me some love. I hope they approve of me. I hope they treat me well. I hope they allow me some dignity and some friendship. I hope they make me feel good about myself. But there's also the fear of meeting someone that you really like. Did you know that? Because there's a fear that comes about with that. When you meet someone nice, you think, better to meet someone you don't like, because if you meet someone you like, you hope that they'll like you and approve of you. If they don't, whatever will you do? It's really scary. And sometimes people enter into relationships with people that they don't like, just so they won't have to face the fact that if they were with someone that they genuinely liked and respected and looked up to, that person might not approve of them and might not like them. That happens to us all the time. It's a big mishmash of confused feelings. This hope and fear and all of the ideas that come from it, and it does continue, because once you have fear, you have a whole concept that enters your mind about what that fear is and what it's going to do. If you begin to feel fearful about a person, you instantly, have you noticed yourself doing this, create a whole scenario of what probably is going to happen. I mean, it's interesting how we manage to map out our lives beforehand. We have it all worked out. What's the point of even going through it? We know exactly what's going to happen. We're going to be miserable. We have it all worked out. And then the other side of it is that if we really like a person, and we have some hope about it, we instantly create some kind of conceptual proliferation in which we make this whole scene in where that person loves us and it utterly changes our lives, and suddenly everything's better and we're happy at last. And of course, with a scenario like that, since things never really happen that way, we're going to be disappointed and we're going to be let down. Whatever way we go, whether we react in hope or fear, we're genuinely asking for trouble, due to the conceptual proliferation that comes after that. We always assume things are going to happen a certain way. We always judge that they are going to happen a certain way. We always project our minds, in a sense, onto the screen of life, in a very literal sense, onto the screen of life. And actually, according to the teaching and according to what you might have even noticed for yourself, often our experience of life is really strange compared to what other people are experiencing in the same moment, at the same time, under the same condition. It's a wonder to us how we can experience things so individually. If any of us have ever taken the trouble to engage in a reality check, which we rarely ever treat ourselves to, we might have noticed that really we're having our own envelope of experience. And it all has to do with this constant conceptual proliferation that occurs. This conceptual proliferation has a lot to do with view. Now, incorrect view results from the idea of self-nature being inherently real. There is no way that we can exist in samsara without incorrect view resulting. Now, on the path of Vajrayana, the most important directive that we are given is to attain pure view through devotion. That is extremely important. And in that way, we will awaken the wisdom sense or the wisdom mind and move closer to realization. We're given many different ways to do that. One of the ways that we're given to do is to meditate on emptiness. And in meditating on emptiness, we do not instantly assume self-nature to be inherently real. We also are given the directive to meditate on compassion and to practice compassion so that we remove the clinging to self-nature and the desire and grasping that comes from the belief in self-nature. But one thing that we might also do is to challenge our own conceptual proliferation. We might actually challenge our view as it is. Here's something that's an interesting thought, and we can think about this every day, and it's a scary thought too. You are now engaging in conceptual proliferation because you have ideas about what you're seeing and hearing. And these ideas tell you something about your environment, something about me, who you think to be separate from you, and something about you, who you think to be separate from me. So all of these things are going on, and basically you're in a process right now, even as we speak, of superstructuring. You're building a structure, and then building a structure on top of that, and another one on top of that, and another one on top of that. And your life, your continuum, actually exists in that it is that superstructure. That is your experience. But if you trace it down, the conceptual proliferation can be traced to hope and fear, can be traced to attraction and repulsion, can be traced to duality, can be traced to ego identification or the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real. Now the Buddha teaches us that from the get-go, from the beginning, this is all tainted and all wrong. Now we walk around all day long feeling angry and justified because we're angry. And if we are not justified, we try to find justification, and we will, given enough time. We spend the rest of our day, when we're not angry, feeling self-righteous, good or bad about ourselves, guilty, morose, elated, blissful, happy, victorious, like failures, all these things. And often we can feel both victorious and a failure within the same 5-minute time span. We just walk around with this kind of continuum going on. That is the experience of our lives, and it is our continuum. Based on that, we act. We act a certain way because we're angry. We act a certain way because we're sad. We act a certain way because we're happy. We act a certain way because of all the feelings that we feel. And then we react to the response that we get because of the way we acted. Where does it stop? Well, it doesn't until we die. And then we get reborn again. That is the experience of continuum. If it can all be traced back to the idea of self-nature being inherently real, And the Buddha teaches us that that is a false assumption, because that is not our nature to contrive in such a way. Our nature is the fully accomplished, spontaneously liberated, primordial wisdom view. But if instead we are having all this other stuff go on, the first thing that you can say to yourself every day, and the thing that you can say to yourself every moment of every day, is that I don't know what the heck is going on here. And that should be the first thing that you do every day. Rather than assume self-nature being inherently real, the first thing you should assume is that you do not know your derriere from a hole in the wall. Did I say that nicely enough? This is, after all, a temple. You can safely assume that you don't know what's going on. So perhaps you can challenge yourself by taking a moment to just breathe, just be. Now, the Buddha teaches us a certain kind of meditation in which we watch thoughts and think of them as coming to the surface of the mind like bubbles that come from the bottom. You can think of your mind as a lake, and you can think of thoughts that simply rise to the surface. Now, if a bubble rises to the surface of a lake, where will it go when you pop it? It simply pops. Now, supposing we were to think of thoughts in the same way. Whatever conceptual proliferation that rises to the surface of the lake of your mind, supposing you weren't to follow it. Supposing you were to simply let it go. Let it pop. Look at it square in the eye and say, oh, that's another one of those conceptual proliferation things. What if you didn't let it dictate your life? According to the teaching, and according to the recommendations that all of our teachers have given us, those thoughts have no inherent reality other than the reality that we give them in expressing and clinging to the continuum. So if we were to simply let them be what they are, they're just bubbles. Only bubbles. And we can let them go. Our tendency, however, happens to be a very neurotic one. When we see a bubble rise to the surface of the lake of our mind, first of all, we don't even get that our mind is a lake. We're just in the sea of wavy stuff. Just constantly in this big wavy sea. And so when a bubble rises to the surface of the sea of despair that we are involved in, we beat it to a froth. I mean, we get a little psychic egg beater and we just go to town, beating it and whipping it up. And pretty soon we have lots and lots of bubbles, and then the next thing we do is say, oh my God, bubbles! And we panic and follow them everywhere they go. And we assume that because those bubbles are there that we are the bubbles. And that is our life. Now, the Buddha teaches us that we don't have to do that. In fact, that's really dumb. So the first thing you want to do when you get up in the morning is think, I really don't know what's going on here. I've been whipping myself into a froth of confusion since the who knows when, and I'm really just not getting the big picture. Now, that's when it's possible to accomplish some view. Because the view comes in where you can look at the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and you can look at your guru or teacher as being the representative and administrator of those three and the embodiment of those three, and you can think, well, in my confusion, even I can see that the Buddha was different than me. Not in his nature, because he taught that in his nature, we are the same. But in his perception, he was different. The Buddha said about himself, I am awake. That means when a bubble rose to the lake of his mind, he knew what to do with it or what not to do with it. He didn't panic and beat it into a froth. His mind wasn't filled with the samsaric conditioned response and conceptual proliferation that ours is, his mind was very much like a lake. He wasn't filled with the same kind of confusion that we are. So he can see clearly. And when the Buddha tells you that your nature is not like that, and that you can let it go, and that you can meditate on emptiness and arrive at accomplishing wisdom and compassion, then you can believe that that's true. And you can believe it more than you can believe actually what your own two eyes and your own mind tells you. Now that's scary for Westerners because we've been taught, think for yourself. Well, try to remember what thinking for yourself actually means. You've been doing it since you were born, and what good has it done you so far? I mean, think about it. You've been whipping yourself into a froth since time out of mind and wandering in samsara and confusion. So when we look to the Buddha, we look at someone who has crossed that ocean, who has seen, who has had the mist taken from his view, his eyes, you see, and he can see more clearly. He does not assume, the idea of self-nature as being inherently real. Excuse me, I've just gotten over a cold and there's a frog in my throat that is desperate to get out. He does not assume the idea of self-nature as being inherently real. He has accomplished the understanding of his own true nature, which is that primordial wisdom state. So he's clear, you see, not like us. He does not do duality. He does not do attraction and repulsion. He does not do hope and fear. And he does not do superstructuring or conceptual proliferation. When you think about the Dharma, you think about that is actually the teaching that the Buddha has brought to the world. And he brought to the world a means or a way by which each one of us can accomplish that kind of clarity. When we think of the Sangha, we think of the Sangha as the religious community or spiritual community who engages in the practice and upholds the practice and makes it available to us. When we think of the Lama, we think of the Lama as being all those three wrapped into one, because the Lama gives us the Buddha's teaching, has accomplished the teaching as well, provides a means by which we can receive the teaching and keeps the teaching safe and available to us. And so the Lama then is like the doctor or the nurse who actually gives us the medicine. Therefore, the view becomes this. I have been wandering in samsara since time out of mind. I cannot see straight. I'm wandering kind of helplessly because I have this false assumption and all kinds of false contrivance that arises from that, and confusion that arises from that. Therefore, I take refuge in that which is clarity, in that which is the primordial wisdom, in that which is the very display of innate wakefulness without confusion. I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and especially in the Lama as being all three. And so the view becomes that. The Lama is seen as that which is a beacon of clear light in a world where we are wandering in confusion. And we hold that view. That is one way in which we should most assuredly view the Guru. That is the understanding. When we see the Guru, we don't look at the Guru and say, well, I like him or her, or I don't like him or her. We don't think like that. That's not a good reason to take a teacher. And it's not a good reason to reject a teacher. We accept a teacher based on the clarity that they can show us, and whether they themselves have accomplished crossing the ocean of suffering. And so our view of the teacher is based on that. Now we find ourselves in a position where we are confused, we really don't get the big picture, we really are experiencing everything that we experience due to a false assumption and false reaction and false set of conceptual ideas, conceptualizations built on all those erroneous views. How can we untangle this spaghetti kind of phenomena? Well, if we tried to pick out the pieces one by one, we will still be doing it from the point of view of the assumption of self-nature. So it's never going to be clear. We really must rely on the perception of that one who has crossed the ocean of suffering. We really have to rely on the guidance of our teacher and the teaching of the Buddha. We really must rely on that. The most important step that any student can make, and any good student will really have to make this at some point, is arriving at the conclusion or coming to the understanding that you really just don't know, that you really just don't have a clue. Many students, when they first come to temple or when they first begin on the spiritual path, feel a kind of arrogance, a kind of pridefulness and a kind of arrogance. And we talked about that the last time that we were together. They really assume that that they know something, you know. Well, I've had several different teachers, and I've been on the spiritual path for some time now, and yes, I have a great affinity for spiritual things, and in fact, I myself have taught a few people in my humble way, you know, and they sort of think like that, and they come to the temple, and then they think, yes, well, I've tried everything, so now I think I'll try some Tibetan Buddhism because, you know, it's really exotic, so having been everywhere, I guess I'll try Tibet. And so that's what they think, really, when they come to the path. And really, even some of the oldie goldies over here were like that. Oh, let me tell you, it was Pew City for a long time. I actually had many of them come to me and tell me how wonderful they were and how helpful they've been in other people's spiritual awakening. And all they needed from me was a reading. You don't think that's weird? Then you have some work to do. So anyway, they experience that, and you may actually be experiencing that. You may feel just a little itchy under the collar when I talk about this, or a little uncomfortable. At any rate, there will come a point in any proper student's life when they might enter in that way, and then at some point they simply realize that they don't know anything. They just haven't got a clue in the world. And at that point, they finally have entered onto the path. Because you cannot enter onto the path any other way. And every religion has a way of telling you that. I'm thinking about Christianity, that you have to enter Jerusalem through the eye of the needle. That actually means there is actually a place in Jerusalem, as I understand it, or was, I don't know if it's actually still there, where there is a tunnel or a rock formation which is quite low, and it's called the Eye of the Needle. And camels going into Jerusalem that way actually have to get down on their knees to enter into it. So that analogy is made, that you have to enter by getting down on your knees. You actually have to get off of the arrogance that you have and the spiritual superiority. This may come as a shock to you, but in fact you are not getting messages from Jesus or Buddha or anybody else from the Pleiades star system as you thought you were every night at 7 o'clock. You actually are not getting the confused inner the inner directives that you thought you were. You're just confused. And I'm really sorry about that. I really hate to break this to you, but you're having a lot of problems. So anyway, when you get to the point on the path that you can actually realize that you're somewhere and you're in good shape, Until you realize that, believe me, and you're not going to like my saying this, and you might not come back, but you're nowhere, and you're not in good shape. We who are sentient beings are wandering in samsara. And according to the Buddha's teaching, if we have the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real, we are all basically in the same condition of wandering. It is only the gurus and the teachers who in their past may have accomplished sufficient dharma, and again they accomplished dharma, which is the teaching of the enlightened mind. Having accomplished dharma, they actually have clarified their mind to the point that they can see through the mist in a way that we cannot. And you should trust in those teachers who have themselves accomplished their practice. Some guidelines that you might use are this way, and I've taught this before, and I would like to reiterate this because this is important at this time. You can have two kinds of expectation about a proper teacher for you, or about yourself if you think you are a proper teacher. One of them is that you should have totally, in this lifetime, have accomplished and be yourself teaching pure dharma that is brought by the enlightened mind, the Buddha. One who has attained Buddhahood. This is not the kind where you make it up yourself according to the messages that you're getting from the Pleiades. This is real dharma, no kidding, Buddha taught it. If you are accomplishing dharma or have accomplished it in this lifetime, and you are teaching dharma, then you are a qualified teacher, or then someone that you're looking for is a qualified teacher. The only other circumstance is if there is someone who is born, who is recognized to be a reincarnate lama or a tulku or a great bodhisattva who has in the past accomplished dharma sufficiently to where in this lifetime their minds are the very display of dharma and all of their activity is engaged in dharma and results in dharma. And that can only be determined by others who are themselves recognized and realized in that way, having recognized such a one. Those are the only two kinds of teachers that you should accept. And if you yourself are neither one, then you are not a good teacher. The rest are wandering in samsara, and there is confusion and suffering. So that being the case, you have a choice to make now. And the choice is based on either continuing your dreamlike false assumptions and dreamlike confusion and continuing the narcotic experience of just living in superstructured conceptual proliferation, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth. Or you can get off of that and trust in the teaching of one who has accomplished dharma, trust in what ends up being like a lighthouse beacon in a very dark land. And go in that direction that you are guided to go in by your teacher. You must have a proper teacher. Go in that direction and follow those instructions implicitly. And if you were to do so, to assume that you know nothing, to think that you know nothing because of your confusion, doesn't make you bad, doesn't make you less than anyone else. It simply states the facts. You're still worthy. You still, in your nature, are the Buddha. You still are equally worthy of love with all sentient beings. But you accept the condition that you actually are in, and it provides a tool for you, a power, a potency that you didn't have before. Before, it was like you were wandering around in a dark room trying to find the door, and it's pitch black and there's all kinds of furniture and things hanging and drapes and dividers and things like that, and all you could do was stumble. You should think of the teacher as being like a lighthouse that shows you the door, and in fact also is the door, because it shines to you from outside the door. And you should go in that direction. And when you start going in that direction and assuming the validity of the teacher's mind, and assuming that that is refuge, once you actually assume that, the moment that you assume that, you have begun to accomplish view. The moment you take that directive, other than your own confusion, as the direction in which you should go, you have started to heal. You have started to make real spiritual progress. You are on the path of Dharma. That is when your spiritual life begins. Now, in the way of confession, I will tell you that, and honesty, actually, I will tell you that this kind of situation has happened to me, and I've really done my best to remain pure in holding to the equality of all that lives. Because the way in which I hold to the equality of all that lives is that I don't look at you in the way that you are now. I don't see you that way. I see you as being the very Lord, the very Buddha. And that someday you yourself will be in the business of liberating beings. So you are, each and every one of you, to me, a treasure beyond any measure. A treasure, a unique and incredible treasure. But not unique in your individuality. Unique in that, in samsara, there's nothing like what you really are. But I don't actually look at each of your personalities. So I've had people say to me that I'm not accessible in that way on a human level. It's not that I'm not accessible on a human level. I do feel that I am accessible on a human level. I'm just not friendly on that level because I don't see you on that level. I don't want to either. What would be the point? You do that well enough on your own. I can give you something else, and I'd rather do that. So here's what happens, and here's where the honesty and the confession comes in. I've had it happen a number of times that before I give a class, I'll be told that a teacher is here. There's a teacher here. Someone will be sitting down and they'll say, this person teaches spiritual things to others. And has a number of teachers, like 25 or 30 maybe. 30 is much more impressive than 25, don't you think? So anyway, this person will, and oftentimes, and that person will be, they'll sit down there and just think, just remember that this person's here, and they even teach a little yoga. Or, no, this person's here and they channel, like the hierarchy and everything. And so, and you should be, should know that this person is here. And I think what they expect me to do is go, woo, that I never do, and it's just so darn disappointing to everybody. Nobody really likes this about me. In fact, what I actually do is, and here's where the meanness in me comes out, what I actually do is that when I find such a one, I find a way to rib teachers that day. Or I find a way to not pay any special attention to them. You know why? Because I'd like to dismantle that superstructure. I'd like to see it fall apart before my very eyes. I would like to see them come to the point where they realize that they just don't know. And they need to follow the guidance of the Buddha's teaching. They need to follow the enlightened mind and truth. They need to get off the high of power and pride. They need to get real. Like that little guy said, get down and get funky. And so it actually probably looks like, and perhaps there is a little bit of arrogance in there somewhere, what do you say? But in fact, I want to tell you from my heart that I see that one, whoever that one might have been, the same as any of you, all in the same condition, all in the same shape, ultimately and supremely worthy, worth saving, worth loving. And I promise you from the depths of my being that I would come back and reincarnate if I could be of benefit to any one of you, just for one of you, and for that one also. So you can't say that the love's not there. But I don't think that we're serving ourselves, and I don't think that we're serving each other when we play that little game. I think we only benefit when we accomplish pure view. And we can only accomplish pure view when we really face and wrestle with the idea of confusion, our own personal confusion. So I challenge you to awaken each morning and continue every moment of every day by thinking, I don't know anything, and make a big joke about it. Okay? That's going to be your big joke, like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Your big joke today is that you don't know anything. You just don't have a clue. And so you're going to start dismantling this craziness that you run around in and try to look for the lighthouse. Try to see it. Don't make one up either. Go to your guru. Go to your teacher. Come and find out the path and practice the path and practice it purely. And if your guru says to you that you are confused, then buddy, you are confused. And if your guru says to you that you should practice compassion instead of anger, drop the anger, practice compassion. And if your guru says to you that you should let those thoughts, whatever they might be, whether they're anger or pridefulness or whatever, rise to the surface of your mind and just go, leave them alone, don't follow them, that you should meditate like that, then, pal, it's time to do it. And you should think like that. You should think that when you hear your guru's teaching, when you hear the teaching of the Buddha through the mouth of your guru, you should think that this is the very nature of my own mind shining at me, that this is liberation. This is liberation. And really think like that. This is liberation. So, that's my teaching for you today. And if you wonder whether or not, so tell me, is this at all appropriate to Valentine's Day? Yeah, it is. Because it's a message about the fact that you are worthy of love all equally. Equally. And that we are also confused all equally. And that we can work it out together equally.
So thank you very much for joining us today. So happy that you could be with us and that you could experience this teaching of Jetsama's. It's one of my favorite things to do, wake up and say, I don't know anything, because boy, it's really true. Anyway, let me move on and go on to the other things that we have available for you here at KBC. We'd love to share with you. First of all, you are always welcome, if you're in the area, to come physically and come outside and experience the Just the place of refuge and the meditation gardens and the walking trails and the stupas and the statues and all the places of refuge that we have available for you, dawn to dusk, every day. And in addition, on weekends from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., the prayer room itself is open inside. We look forward to the time when it will be open a whole lot more, but right now that's what we can offer you, and we happily do so. So please come and enjoy that as well. In addition, just about everything we do is online. So we have practices every day, and in those practices we have prayers offered for just about everyone. Anyone who has put their prayer requests on Tara.org, you can send them to us that way. You can email them to us at prayers@tara.org. You can, anyway, all kinds of ways you can send prayers to us. And we're happy to then share them and include them in the practices that we do. We have a soak each day. Most days during the week it's at 5:30 p.m. And it is on Zoom, and the information for that is on Tara.org. Go to events on the upper menu and drop down to calendar. And when you click on the event, any of the events, you will be able to find out where it is and how to get to it. So on YouTube, we have these same teachings of Jetsamas available. In addition to these Sunday mornings, we have Wednesday evening at 7:30. We also show them regularly. In addition, Atira is teaching on YouTube a beginning Buddha series. Her next class, I believe will be on December 12th. She teaches twice a month, usually the second and fourth Sundays at 5 p.m. So you can find that also on the calendar and attend that. There are her past teachings, as are Jetsamas, all available on YouTube. You can just go to Kunzang Payol Choling on YouTube.com and find all that you want. There's hundreds there. All of Atira's teachings are up there, as well as many, 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 many of Jetsamas, and teachings from other lamas who have been here at KPC Khenpo Pem, and other teachers who have been here are also up there for you to watch anytime. Let's see. In the evenings at 7 p.m., we have a 15-minute medicine Buddha practice. That practice has been especially given to us by Jetsama for the COVID time. It's short, it's quick, but it's potent, and it will help relieve suffering in this time of a lot of disease. So you are welcome to attend that. That is on Facebook Live. And that's KPC's, it's Kunzang Payol Choling, a Buddhist temple on Facebook. So you can go there. Again, all of these on Tara.org. Click on the event and it will tell you where to go, in case you can't remember. Should you want to make an offering to Jetsama, and to strengthen your connection on receiving the teaching, we welcome you to do that. Her personal PayPal address is jetsamagift@gmail.com. So you can send an offering directly there to her. So we look forward to seeing you next time for one of these teachings, and that would be on Wednesday evening. Also, tomorrow is Dakini Day on the Tibetan calendar. Once a month we have a Guru Rinpoche Day and also a Dakini Day. And they are on the Tibetan calendar, so we can't give you, it doesn't match exactly with ours. But tomorrow is Dakini Day. And so instead of the 5:30 practice, we'll be doing a Yumka soak offering at 7:30 p.m. And you are welcome to join us. Again, it's on Zoom. And you'll find that information on Tara.org. So that's that's our menu for this evening or for this morning. I hope you can join us for any and all of that, and I hope that you stay safe and stay healthy and come see us soon. Take care.